Okay, so that is that. Our barrel is finished. Looks good, turns good, feels very smooth, very professional. So, let's sticker this thing. Alright, so these are the CubeSmith stickers for the barrel. So for the color scheme, I think that I want to put the normal colors as a standard color scheme, and then from there I'll try to put light blue and purple as far opposite from blue as possible. And then the rest will just kind of fall into place. And we are done. Okay, so to wrap up the first chapter of the tutorial, I'd like to show you in very close detail how my barrel turned out. This should give you a basic idea of how yours will turn out if you take your time and do each of the steps properly. Although this is something I've written in each of the video descriptions in the chapter, it should be said out loud. You have to be patient when you're making a puzzle. You can't rush things. If you rush things, or if you get frustrated, you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes mistakes are not easy to fix. Anytime you get tired or frustrated when you're making a puzzle, you have to take a break and come back tomorrow. Anything worth making is going to take more than one afternoon. Mine took a few days and probably a total of about 4 hours. For cutting, you have to cut every piece perfectly. Don't try to cut corners here, or the overall shape of your puzzle will suffer as a result. Similarly, for sanding, make sure you take your time on every piece to shape them all identically. It does take a long time to get the results you want, and there shouldn't be any rush to make something like this. The longer it takes, the more you'll learn, and the more you'll appreciate the puzzle when it's done. Also, if you don't enjoy the actual building process, you won't go very far in making puzzles. Alright, so now I'll show you some of the details and flaws in this puzzle so you can see that it is not by any means perfect. I know it looks really good from a bit of a distance, but upon a closer inspection, you'll notice that there are some flaws. The first and foremost is that you can actually see where the cap meets the piece. These lines here in light gray, that's actually the epoxy, and you can see that the seams are not exactly perfect. Sometimes they look a bit messy, and that's just an error in sanding on my part. This one looks pretty good here, but definitely they're not all perfect. Regardless, so I think it turned out very nicely. One thing that I would do to improve this, if I were to do this again, is I would have, when I was cutting, I would have compensated for the thickness of the plastic. I mentioned in one of the videos that the plastic is about 1/16 of an inch thick for the caps, and that actually changes the shape of the piece by more than a negligible amount. So if you were to compensate for that when you were cutting, and just cut a little bit deeper, the finished product might have been a bit nicer. One of the problems I have with this that I don't like so much is that I rounded the piece off a lot on the corner, and if it was nice and sharp, it would look a lot better. So I'll scramble this up a bit so you can see what it looks like mixed. Since not all of the pieces are the same, the puzzle does change shape a little bit, but not too drastically. Also, there are a few tricks to this puzzle. First, the diagonal colors do not have centers, so you can sometimes make mistakes when you're placing your color scheme. Secondly, the middle layer barrel cut edges do not have an orientation, so you have a good chance of running into an orientation parity in the last layer. Also, because of the ambiguity of the diagonal colors, you may run into a PLL parity, which can be easily fixed with this algorithm. Lastly, there are 2 solved states for this puzzle. If you do this sequence to a solved state, you will reach another solved state which is different, where the diagonal colors are swapped with the opposite sides, sort of an X-perm for corners, if you will. So that concludes the first chapter of my puzzle building guide. The octagon barrel part of the guide was actually sort of a trick. I don't think anyone needs the tutorial on how to make this, but I thought it would be a really good way to introduce you to a method for making basic cuts, how to use epoxy properly, and the importance of sanding and polishing the pieces. These are the three main skills that you'll need for puzzle building on the basic level, and I hope this serves as a good introduction for you. I hope that if you decide to make an octagon barrel or anything else from later videos in this series, that it turns out very well, and that you learn a lot about craftsmanship in the process. Just remember that anything worth doing is 10% skill and 90% patience. Also, make sure that every mistake you make is a lesson learned. I really hope you enjoyed the first part of this guide. If you're thinking about trying this mod, I encourage you to do so. If you manage to finish and the results are good, you may also want to try some other basic shape mods, such as cube octahedron or a half truncated cube. They both use the same sort of skills that were taught in this chapter of the guide.